This is a LEGO Battleship that's fully equipped with a working propeller and 2 rudders, as well as a fully functioning LEGO machine gun turret that shoots dart-tipped bullets. All of which only work now because of many iterations and hours upon hours of designing and building. Then once it was all complete, I put it in a pool. It's no less cold. Oh my goodness, this thing got heavy overnight. Equipped the full magazine of projectiles and pitted it against my friends with 2 smaller balloon boats and had a full-on battle that ended very, interestingly. Creating large LEGO boats can be a challenge, since LEGO is filled with tiny gaps that water loves to creep through, taking any chance it gets to sink the boat. LEGO makes one-piece molded boat hulls, which I almost use inside the frame of the battleship, but they are way too small to make any real difference. So instead of trying to keep all the water out, I'll embrace the problem and just make a boat with no bottom. That way, instead of the water seeping in and sinking the boat, it won't have any effect at all. For the actual frame of the boat, I'll first make an outline using black bricks and build up the walls at a slight taper. There is an internal spine as well to hold everything in place and make it stronger, since LEGO has a tendency to flex when it's built in long lines. To make it float, I eventually decided on using 8 2-liter soda bottles inside the frame, fitted tightly with a bunch of foam scraps to help even more. But if I were to set this in the water right now, the boat would sink and everything inside would float. So using even more black bricks, I built ribs along the top every 8 studs to make sure everything is locked in place. And so nothing falls out the bottom when transporting the boat, I carefully filled the entire thing over and used packaging tape to cover the gaps. Okay, well, before I go any further to make this boat shell into a battleship, let's test it to make sure it even floats in the first place. Now I've got to carefully move this 7-foot long chunk of LEGO from my studio into my car and into my friend's pool. This is Athen. He's one of the guys who I'll be fighting against in the final battle, and it's his family's pool that I'll be testing it in. Thanks, guys. I'm gonna take these LEGO set Arctic Explorer boats and build targets on them that will be knocked over if I'm able to aim the turret well enough, and he'll be piloting one of them. But none of that can happen if the boat doesn't even float in the first place, so we carefully lowered it into the pool, and now that I'm sure it will float, and quite well at that, I'll start building the mechanisms and features that will turn this into a functional battleship. A floor using 48x48 base plates is perfect, and then I'll start building a way to motorize the boat. LEGO motors are plenty powerful in most applications, but water is actually 819 times more dense than air, and if I'm going to get a motor to spin a propeller underwater, it's going to have a lot of torque. This setup uses 2 LEGO motors in unison, both geared down to increase the power of the output axle, and this 2-blade propeller can be slid onto the end. It definitely has enough power in the water when I'm just holding it. Oops. So I attached one to each side of the boat and used a chain drive to connect them to the propellers, since they obviously can't be underwater and connected directly. I can use these in tandem to power the boat, or power them in opposite directions to steer the ship. But I also built in this angular motor, so later on in the build I can add in a rudder to aid the propellers in turning the boat. But that's good enough for now, and the main important part of this build is the turret, since if all I can do is drive the boat around, there won't be much of a battle at the end. So using these 2 special curved gear racks that I stole from this orrery set, we can build a direction system for the turret. These pieces can be attached to a turntable which will be in charge of swiveling left and right, and the gear racks can control the pitch of the turret. I've been wanting to use that technique for a while, but I quickly realized as I messed around with it that it would not work very well, and using something like a linear actuator to lift and lower the end of the gun would be much more reliable, make aiming easier, and be better at moving the heavy load of the full turret on top. So I started back at ground zero with a different technique. I again used this turntable, but first I built up some sloped gray walls to better replicate what an actual battleship might look like. This worm gear housing coupled with a Circuit Cube's motor drives the turntable at the perfect speed to aim reliably, but not be too slow that I can't keep up with the enemy ship. But what good is the LEGO gun without a magazine of ammo ready to be unloaded at ships my friends are driving around? So next I started building the actual shooting mechanism and round to be shot. I've never built something like this before, so I referenced a design made by Brick Technology in this video, but I adapted it to shoot 7-hole long beams instead of 3 since I had a bunch in that size. It took an awfully long time considering I was basically copying the design, and I added in a linear actuator for pitch as well as a full ring of these gear racks with 1x1 round tiles underneath to act as a bearing for support. But eventually I had a functional, spinning, and most importantly, shooting LEGO turret. It's pretty simple. This rubber band holds these beams in place, and when this ball spins around, it collects the beam, bringing it back, which gives the projectiles just enough space to drop one into place, until it's just past the midpoint where the rubber band comes in to send the beam flying into the piece in front of it, and send it quickly out the front of the turret. But now I need to build and test what I'll be shooting at, this official LEGO boat. But it needs some upgrades. First, I'll motorize it, and to use less gears and direction changes, instead of putting the motors over the back, I put them at the side using straight axles. I tried using a really big gear ratio, but that was too much for the motor, so I switched to using a smaller one so the circuit cubes could have enough power underwater to propel the boat. Alright, right. That works well when testing out of water, so I went down to the river with another friend to test it in the water. This is Johnny. He will be helping me pilot the boat and helping me hopefully defeat the 2 small boats that I'm testing right now. The boat surprisingly had enough power to move around, and I can steer by turning one propeller forward and one propeller backwards, which causes one side of the boat to be pulled backwards while the other is being pushed forward, which twists the boat in either direction. Okay, that seemed to work well enough, but I think I can make them faster. Thanks to the help of Elegoo, who sent me their massive Neptune 4 Max, I was able to 3D print some custom blades to go on the end of the axles, since Legos are not efficient at all. Elegoo isn't sponsoring this video, but they provided the printer and I was super impressed by the consistency and quality of the prints even on my wobbly table. I even printed this massive version of a Lego baby, so I've dropped a link below if you want to check them out. It'll also help me out if you do. Then I went back out to the river, this time with a new drone to take some cool shots, with Athen and Johnny to test the new propellers. Yeah, so those are definitely faster, and thanks to a slightly different gear ratio, I think it's even better. Now that I know the boats that my biggest ops will be driving work, I need to make sure mine does, and now that I've been working on other things, I realized how janky the original propeller design was. So I took it off and started a new build with a gearbox. These big Technic plates will hold 4 of the same size Lego motor, which will all use a geared down gear ratio driving one center axle to provide as much torque as possible. Then to stick the propeller in at water level, I'll build this long beam of Technic pieces that can support a chain drive to turn the motor. And when I loosely held the whole assembly in this fish tank, it had enough power to push the single hand I was holding it with backwards. I decided that my best bet on being able to turn sharp enough in a 20-foot wide pool was to make a dual rudder system. So I built a frame around the propeller that would hopefully support the weight of both rudders. Okay, and now the motor just needs to turn about 45 degrees in order to complete a full turn of the rudder. So I hopped back in the car and lugged the boat back to the pool to test one final time before the battle. We lowered it in after attaching the rudders and props, and the chain instantly snapped when I gave it full power, which is not going to work when trying to fight smaller and much more agile Lego boats. But after about 10 minutes of attempting to reattach the chain, we had to fish single links out of the pool one at a time. I tried driving it again. That worked shockingly well. The chain broke a couple more times, but at the very least I had proven that my gearbox of motors was powerful enough to move the boat and the rudders were capable of steering. Well, that certainly gave me a decent amount to work on, and while transporting it home, one of the curved parts of the boat cracked and broke a bit, so I fixed it and got to work for what would hopefully be the final time on making the rudder and propeller system fully functional. I tackled the problem of the chain snapping by rebuilding the support arm and using Lego tread links instead, which would be way stronger and hold together even if I go full throttle right away. Then I rebuilt the rudder system to be way stronger and have way less flex, and used a worm gear at the top to give the motor enough torque to turn them. I also brought them in closer together so hopefully more water from the propeller will push against the rudder. Now, currently in order to drive the boat and shoot the gun, I'd need 2 phones, which isn't very practical and would be next to impossible to actually do both at once. So I hopped on a call with Brick Machines, and he very kindly made me some code using Pybricks that will allow the rudder and propeller to be controlled by the Xbox controller, which works super well and is much cooler than using a phone to control it. But as I was messing with that, I realized that if the motors for the turret were also official Lego motors, it would be possible to map the controls of the gun to a joystick on the controller. So for one final time, I went back to the turret and rebuilt it. And since I was going all out at this point, I went back to the store and bought another Lego orrery set and took the 4 more curved gear rack pieces and started by building a complete bearing, which uses the 1x1 round tiles again, but this way it completely locks them in, since last time everything was falling out. I need 3 motors to run the gun, but my last normal battery hub only has 2 ports, so I resorted to using this move hub that has 2 built-in motors, one of which I used to drive a gear that spins the whole assembly, which has the side bonus of not having any cords to worry about tangling, since the battery box is directly attached to the bearing. Then I switched the other 2 motors out for Lego ones, and finally, it's complete. That is so fun to control. But this battleship isn't complete if I build a control tower and call it good, and I only have 30 rounds in the turret, which realistically means I probably won't be able to hit all the targets. So I want to add some sort of function that I can use as a backup if all else fails. So in true Mark Rober fashion, I started work on a secret compartment with opening doors that will hold my drone, since if I can't use the camera to get any good shots, I might as well put it to work in another way. In order to knock the targets over, I tied a Lego chain to the body of the drone, which is attached to a long tube of 2x2 round bricks, which I can use in theory to fly at the target and knock them over if the turret doesn't cut it. I took the drone outside and tested it with just the bar, as well as with the bar and the sun from the orrery set as kind of a wrecking ball. It works fine with just the bar, although it did get stuck in a tree, but the sun is too heavy for it to fly well, so I'll stick with the original design. To make the door open, I first attempted to use these side rail pieces and build a giant gray plate with a 48x48 base plate that could slide in and out and be motorized. But along the edge I used tiles, thinking it would be fine to fit one stud deep. But these rails are meant for these pieces, which are only a half stud deep, so I had to switch it out. Then once I tested it, I realized just how much friction I'd be dealing with in order to get everything to slide where I wanted it. So I started over with a much different design. Instead of having a door slide out of the way for the drone, I'm going to build two halves that will cover up the compartment, which will hinge at the base, and then build a Technic pulley structure that I can use to hook strings to the innermost part of the doors, which, when pulled, will open them up, giving a really cool effect to the whole process. Now, that's great, but I'm just going to use one motor to power both doors, so hopefully it has enough torque. It has enough power for one. I think it's strong enough. So I'll route the axle connected to each spool around the back using universal joints, and then gear the motor down to give it more torque, and put two of the same gears on the output axle, which can each individually be hooked up to one side of the doors with tread links. Wow, I honestly wasn't expecting that, but it looks incredibly cool, especially when the drone will fly out. Okay, and that's pretty much everything built besides the cosmetic details, and wow, has it been a lot of work getting to this point. Here's the turret. I can control the direction, the pitch, and shooting, all with this. Then we've got a drone hatch, and I have these two working doors, which is controlled by this. Then over here, I've got the actual heller and everything, which is power, and then rudder. I started building the targets, but realized that getting them to fall over when hit by my fairly weak turret, but not from the rocking of the water or bumping of the boats, was going to be really difficult. But then, at about 10 PM the night before filming the battle, I realized that using balloons would be absolutely perfect, so I ran to Walmart and bought balloons and thumbtacks, which I then spent way too long taping to the front of each Technic beam. Okay, let's see if it can pop a balloon. That's not good. Yes, okay, let's go. That's beyond relieving. And with that, it was just down to the small details to finish the boat and have a battle. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. And finally, after weeks of planning and building, hours of setup, just a few minutes into the battle, nothing happened. Just kidding. Safe to say I was fairly excited that it actually worked, and it was followed by a very close miss on the other boat.
Crash into Athens.
Rats, another close miss. But what I haven't shown you is the multiple times I got in the pool to fix something wrong with the battleship, like the rudder misbehaving, as well as the gun jamming multiple times right when I needed it most. And after a little human aid, I still couldn't get any of the darts to pop any new balloons.
What? No cheating was involved.
That's right, Johnny. I couldn't have said it better myself. And after those near misses, I drove it around a little bit more and had a perfectly wide open shot at both boats. I mean, come on, how close could I possibly get without actually popping any of them? So, after 10 more minutes of trying, and a little bit of a crazy shot from the battleship, yep, no assist there, just the battleship, I remembered my secret weapon.
Alright, that's enough of that.
And launched attack number 2. And can we all just appreciate how cool these doors look when they open?
Oh no!
No!
Yes!
another success, which was followed by... I mean, come on, how are they not popping? And then...
Oh, shoot!
Yeah, I think I kinda lost that. Which means there's one final question I need to answer. Can I sit on it?
You're good.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I personally think this is my best video I've ever made, and if you agree or you've never seen any of the other ones, make sure to subscribe. Bye.